This is Family Find Gum Nuts from Mum Edition, and we are using these beautiful gum nuts as inspo for our next piece. So in keeping with the gum nut theme, I literally went out into our garden, found some similar eucalyptus trees, and got a whole bunch of stuff off the floor that is already dried and ready to go. So I've got some seeds here, I've got some leaves. You can see me hot gluing everything onto a cardboard base. Normally I like to line the cardboard base with some packing tape to make it a little easier to remove later on. But this time I forgot and I was in a bit of a rush to get all of this started because I was way too excited. But you can see me just putting the sculpture together. There is no method here. There is no plan. I'm just spinning it around and seeing what works and then gluing it in if I like it. The next step, of course, was to make it possible to suspend the sculpture upside down in our mold. And to do that, I'm taking a wire and attaching it to the bottom with some hot glue. Before we submerge the sculpture inside the mold, we actually need to pour some resin over the top of it and just try and get that resin into as many little air bubbles and crevices as we possibly can so that we can avoid air bubbles later on in the pour. Once I had doused that little guy in resin, it was time to get it in the mold. And this was pretty tricky, and I needed like 2 sets of hands extra to help me stretch open that opening so that I could try and get that sculpture inside the mold with as little breakage as possible. After that, it was just a matter of securing those wires to something to help suspend that sculpture. The sculpture was pretty light, so that full water bottle was enough just on one side even to secure it. And then we started a really nice and slow pour. And this was where I ran into the first set of issues. So what ended up happening was I mixed several different batches of resin and kept topping it up as I went, just so that I could save on over pouring. The issue with that was eventually, after I got it all the way filled up, I realized that the resin was streaky, and this was because the resin batches didn't mix together. And so I had to pour it all out, mix it up really, really, really well, and then pour everything back in. After averting that crisis, I let the resin cure for about 2 days, and then it was time to remove the base and the wire and get all that out ready to pour the next layer of resin. Everything came out not too bad after I gave things a little bit of a snip to help free the glue, and it was just easy to just pull it out after that. Before we pour any more resin, we had to address those air bubbles that had happened on the sides between the mold and that top layer. And to do that, you simply just make the air bubbles bigger, particularly if they're only just at the surface. So making them bigger makes it easier for the resin to pour into those little bubbles and fill them up. Then we were ready to pour another layer of resin just on top and topping it all the way up to where the bottom of that sculpture was attached to the cardboard base. And then just using a skewer to dislodge any air bubbles that had started gathering between the mold and the resin. And this was the precise moment I ran into my next set of issues. I poured the glitter layer way too soon before that other layer was cured. And so it all mixed together and I ended up with this one huge, really, really big, thick layer of glitter. So I ended up having to pour it all out and then clean it all up, and I had to take it out of the mold and use a bunch of acetone and cotton buds and all sorts of things just to get it nice and clean again. After I struggled for like 20 minutes to get it back into the mold, I taped it up to ensure the sides of the mold would stick close to the resin that was already cured. So when I poured in the next layer, it wouldn't seep down the sides. I waited for that next layer to cure for at least 24 hours before I poured that last gold layer, and we finally had it working the way we wanted to. When I tell you demolding this is one of life's hardest challenges, I am not joking. I wrestled with it for like a good 20 minutes, and I swear it almost won at one point against me. But we got there in the end, and my goodness, it was just so beautiful from the get-go as soon as it came out. There was still a fair bit of wayward glitter that kind of attached itself to the sides there from that mishap. So I wanted to sand all that off and recoat it with a top coat of resin just to kind of perfect it a little bit more. And very shortly, you were going to see why that was a bad idea. But here I am sanding away. I think I started with 220, worked my way up to about 800 just to get it ready to top coat it. Super important part of any kind of top coating or flood coating is you want to layer the bottom of your piece with some PVA glue. I've seen other people use Elmer's, which is fine as well, but a nice thick layer ends up catching any drips that will drop to the base of your piece and makes it really super duper easy to pull off. For the top coat, I just wanted to use a 1-to-1 kit because it has a lower workability time in that it cures a little bit quicker than your deep pour resin. And so I poured that all over the top, let it drip all the way down, made sure that I was looking all the way around the globe, making sure that every part of it was touched by resin and nice and see-through, and it all seemed to be coming along really, really well. I ended up with a little bit of overpour, so I disappeared for 10 minutes to go grab a mold to pour that overpour into, and I came back to this. I panicked. I wasn't sure what I was going to do to fix this. After a few moments, I calmed down and then realized all I needed to do was just pour the rest of that overpour on top of that and it would fix it. And because it was 10 minutes later, the resin in the overpour cup was at a better consistency to actually do the job. Now, removing the ball from the resin was easy thanks to that layer of PVA. Everything just kind of peeled straight off. You can see me here literally peeling off the layer and taking any drops of resin that is cured on the bottom of the piece.
Here she is. It is not perfect by any means, but it is still pretty damn cool if I do say so myself. I have learned so much doing this little guy, so let's get into that right now. What I did was go into our backyard and get as many other things that I thought would kind of match with that theme of the gum nut. So that included those sort of fluffy little orange thingies. As I poured the resin, a few of the orange pieces dropped to the bottom, and you can kind of see them here. The hot glue gun that I used had like a milky colored glue in it. You can kind of see there and in other bits and pieces where that milky color is obviously not clear. I will use a clear glue stick next time. So I ended up needing to mix like 3 or 4 batches of resin to pour in. And then what ended up happening was I could see inside the mold, the resin was getting streaky and murky. And that's just because those different batches of resin didn't get to be mixed together. So I ended up pouring it all out and mixing it really, really well and letting it sit for a little while to release as many air bubbles as possible and then re-pouring it into the mold. And that seems to have done the trick. You can't really see any streakiness in the actual resin. It's pretty clear. The next issue that we ran into was the pouring of the glitter. That was supposed to be a lot more straightforward than it ended up being. I removed the cardboard and that all came off really well. I topped up with clear resin and let it sit, and I thought it might be cured enough. So I mixed up a batch of gold glitter resin and poured that in, but this resin here wasn't cured enough, and so they all ended up mixing together. And so I had this big, massive, thick line of gold. So I had to pour it out, take it out of the mold, clean it up. I used some acetone and some cotton buds and lots of wiping, lots and lots of patience to clear it up as much as possible. I forced it back into the mold and then sort of topped it up with clear resin. You can see where I had some casualties in the leaves that broke. You can still see very clearly the line that it came up to, and it came out looking good out of the mold, but there were some blemishes, some wayward glitter that I wanted to try and sand off. I actually wanted to try and sand these off, but they were in a lot deeper than I thought they were. So I gave everything a really good sand, ready for that sort of top coat, flood coat situation. The pour went on really well, and then I disappeared for 10 minutes to go try and find something to use the overpour in a mold, and then I came back to orange peel, and that was not good at all. And so that 10-minute space that I had left in between that first pour and the resin in the jar already, I poured that resin on top of this again, and that was thick enough. I think I could have maybe waited another few more minutes and that would have been even better, because you can see I've still got a little bit of orange peel happening as it is anyway. So just in the right light, you can see. Before I did the final coat with resin, I actually tried using an acrylic lacquer, like a spray for automotive purposes. It was fine, but it was not as clear and glossy as resin. You can see that we've got air bubbles trapped. Because it was suspended downward like this,
it makes it very hard for the air bubbles to escape once the resin gets poured in. Even though I was pouring really, really slow, it was still not slow enough, or these guys were at just this unfortunate angle where the air just couldn't get out. So what would I do differently next time? Obviously, perfecting that process of the top coat pour would be on the top of the list. So just finding that right viscosity of the resin before pouring it to avoid that orange peel and to ensure like complete coverage. But the other thing I think I would do too is perfect that step in between the sculpture and the resin. So that step where I poured resin on top of the sculpture to kind of eliminate as many air bubbles as possible. It kind of worked well, it worked okay, but I think I should have done that a little better. I would quite possibly give everything a dip in resin, let it cure, and then put the sculpture together.
Give me a home among the gum trees, with lots of plum trees. A sheep, a tuak, a kangaroo, a clothesline out the back, veranda out the front, and an old rocking chair.
If you have stuck around this far, thank you so much for experimenting with me, and I will see you in the next one.